besides calling Tanya out like that? How did it feel different?
It was easier.
It was easier. Why?
We're talking about somebody else.
Okay, you're talking about somebody else? What else?
I don't know that it was any more easy because this one, we're scripted basically. I can do that first one from the script.
Yeah.
I know exactly what I'm going to say
Yeah.
because I would say it at the beginning of every time that I meet a patient or do an
Okay,
intervention.
sure, yeah. Okay. This time when I, like just the observer, like watching, I saw a lot of smiles on people's faces as you're talking about somebody who you care about. I saw you get out your phone and you're showing pictures of people. So I think the biggest takeaway for me when I did this activity, I could tell a difference in myself and my own affect when I was talking about somebody that really mattered to me. My takeaway for you is every single person that you interact with, even those ones who you are like, so done, matters to somebody, right? I mean, they matter to there's somebody in their lives that they matter a lot to. And if we think about, again, our mission of treating our patients the way we want our loved ones to be treated, some of the patients we work with can be very challenging, particularly when, they're in for the third time and we feel like they're not getting any better. All of those things, if you put yourself in, what if that were my daughter? What if that were my brother? What if that were my sibling? What if that were my mother? How would I want them to be treated? And if any of you, I'm sure we've all been there, where we have a loved one on the other side of it, maybe not behavioral health, but in the hospital, and you realize, you know what, every time I go up there, the nurse doesn't seem to really know what's going on. I miss the doctor every time. It gets a little frustrating. And so, that's the piece I wanted for us to feel, is that sense of empathy for the patients and the family members that we work with. And as hard as it is, to put that at our forefront every day when we come to work. So, moving on. So I'm going to talk the rest of the time a little bit about, part of it's going to sound familiar, again, for those of us who are a little more tenured and we've had the engagement model, and therapeutic milieu. So therapeutic milieu, for those of you who maybe have never, that hasn't been part of your repertoire, that used to be a really common theme back in the day when our average length of stay used to be a little closer to 30 days than 3 days, and it was really a community that we were trying to build. Some of the new research shows we can take some of that from that research and implement it today in a little bit of a different way maybe, but really thinking about that milieu, that everything we do within the context of our work and our patients needs to be very intentional with a therapeutic outcome in mind. So really, a milieu, just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page, is really just a social environment. So that example is he grew up in a military milieu. A therapeutic milieu then is really an environment that focuses on community therapy, an approach of looking at, in a psychiatric environment, that, again, everything we do, every interaction we have is with the intent of being therapeutic. So the words we say matter, how we say them matter. It can be, the work we do can be hard, and some of our patients are really good at pushing our buttons and wearing us down, but it's our job as staff people to always be thinking about that therapeutic approach that we can have. So I'm going to go over, that's kind of going to be the rest of what we're going to talk about, is how can we create a therapeutic milieu? How does that tie up to trauma-informed care? And it really does. I mean, I feel like we're tying some things together. And then how can we go forward to make sure that we're being very intentional with the work we do? Therapeutic milieu is not like a specific technique. It's an approach. So it's sort of this umbrella, overarching approach. When I think a little bit about when we've done some of the motivational interviewing stuff. It's that spirit of how we interact with people that really is important. And I'll give some examples as we go, but that's what I want us to be thinking about is it's not, and which is the way trauma-informed care is too. You know, trauma-informed care, we're thinking about, I like to compare it to universal precautions. You know, when you come into the hospital, everybody's putting on gloves because we don't know who's been exposed to what. Same thing with trauma-informed care. We need to assume that most of our patients, because research would show most of our patients have experienced trauma, may still be experiencing trauma, and how do we make sure that how we're interacting with them doesn't re-traumatize them. So a therapeutic community, one of the things that's really important is that we're clearly stating what we want all the time. And that all of that rolls up to everybody being safe. It's about rights and responsibilities, it's about expectations, and that clear identification of interventions. So one of the things in talking to, I think many of you have met Jean, the consultant that we're working with, or have at least seen her around. One of the things she talked about in terms of therapeutic milieu is, you know, maybe I'm the one doing rounds on the unit, 15-minute rounds, and I noticed that one of the patients is acting a little different today. He's a little off, a little agitated. What am I going to do at that moment to prevent that from escalating? You can do the same thing in adult partial use or any of the outpatient areas. You see somebody come in for a day and they act a little different than they were yesterday. You could say, well, I'll just give them some time and see how this plays out. Or you could intentionally do something and you know, maybe you get them to go for a walk with you, or maybe you see if you can engage them in a craft activity. Whatever it is that maybe you know them a little bit to know what might be some good strategies for them. Maybe you don't. Maybe you say, hey, I need some help moving this chair from one place to another, whatever it is. But engaging them right away to prevent some aggressive outbursts later. But it's really that, like every interaction, again, being very intentional with the interactions that we have. The part about clearly stating expectations, you know, we talk about this a lot with kids. You know, kids do better with a lot of structure and clear expectations, but so do adults. Okay, so I think that we know, one of the really cool things I'm very proud of is how we're really working on increasing our structure on all of the units. You know, so we know that the more we structure the time, the less time it is for people to, you know, act up. But if we as adults, and I'll throw us in there too, if we know what our expectations are, we're less likely to veer outside of those expectations. So it's really important that expectations are clear and spelled out consistently. So the other piece that's really important is creating goals and articulating those goals. And I know on 2 East we've incorporated some goal setting at the beginning of the day. You know, we always do that. I'm sure you do that in adult partial. We talk about what are your goals for treatment today, what are your long-term goals, making sure that we're incorporating that into our day-to-day work. That last bullet really is talking about that trauma-informed care, adverse childhood experiences, and really understanding how that trauma impacts developmental process, the developmental process of people. And we know people who are substance abusers, and sometimes they'll say, you can see when they first started using, kind of by the age they act. You know, if they act 14, they probably started using at about that age, because sometimes their development actually stops at about that age. We know that people who are significantly traumatized, their brains aren't wired up the same. You've seen those pictures that I've shown before in some division meetings of brains that they literally are wired up differently because of the trauma they've been exposed to. And so they're going to respond differently to things. So, you know, those people who we talk about, you know, they don't respond to things the way we think they're going to. Sometimes they don't respond to the medications the way we would expect them to. But we need to be thinking about that, we need to be aware of that, and that will help us interact with them. Again, structured groups and programming. All of the day-to-day interactions by staff should be intentional with the goal of therapeutic healing. That's hard. That's hard when you think about, you know, again, I'll use my own life experience in the last couple of weeks. So my dad's been in the hospital. I have a son who's moving into a group home on Thursday. So I have all of this stuff that's kind of going on in my brain, And I'm also coming to work and trying to put all of this stuff together. And you guys have that too. We all have our own stuff that you walk around with every day. So how do you come to work intentionally and compartmentalize that when you can, or ask for help from your coworkers to say, you know what, I had to work with Joey yesterday. I'm not sure that I can do that today, just where I'm at. And so setting up, but when you're doing assignments, if you're the charge person, when you're setting those assignments, be cognizant of that too. I don't know if any of you guys participated in perception walkthroughs that Jean has done. We're going to try to do more of those. I would love to do those in the outpatient areas too. What that is you walk onto the unit as if you're walking onto it for the first time, as a patient or as a family member. What do you notice? You know, what are some things that are welcoming? I mean, we know that, let's just be honest. I don't know if you all know this, my dream, you know, I'm 52, so I have to, this dream needs to be accomplished before I retire. I'd love to have a brand new freestanding psychiatric building so that we could build it. Alexis is much younger than me, so if I don't get the dream, then it'll become your dream. So that it could be, you know, for the 3 East, it's child-friendly, it's colorful. You know, for 2 East, it's not just this color green here on every wall. But the reality is we have what we have, right? So what are some things that we can do when you walk in the door to make it as welcoming as you can? Well, one is the person sitting at the desk can smile and say good morning. What?
Color.
Color. I've been telling them. Door frames. It's not moving?
Not moving ahead.
Okay.
Whatever color
Can I
you
just
want.
do that?
We have people that will do it.
I
I'll
know.
do it.
I know I'd like to do it too.
I'll put it on weekend.
Okay, well, we're going to get there. I promise you. Color it's a big thing. But we play a role in that too. You know, when people walk on the unit, are we smiling and saying, you know, hello, welcome, all of those things. But painting the door frames doesn't seem that hard, so we'll see if we can do that. So we're going to do more of those perception walkthroughs. We haven't rolled that out to the outpatient areas, but I think you've got so much opportunity there to, you notice some things. One of the things that I noticed, this is huge kudos to Alexis here. So we were doing, about a year ago when we were preparing for some of our surveys, we walked into the 3 East exam room and I was like, this is horrible. Every single patient comes into this room and there's like, I swear, something taped up that had probably been there for 15 years. The tape was getting yellow, everything was faded, and you know, it's brightened up, it looks so much better, but those things that we don't notice anymore, those little pieces of paper that are stuck to the wall that have probably been there forever, not only would people tell us that's an infection control problem, but it just doesn't look professional. And I'll tell you, I mean, we're not going to talk too much about care financing today, but the budget is a thing. You know, we have to stay on budget. But I tell you, if there's a door that needs to just say, you know, patients must be accompanied by staff to enter this room, it doesn't cost that much to get that sign made. So rather than a laminated piece of paper that we're going to tape there, let's get some signs made. That's a simple thing. But if there's chairs that are broken, let's get rid of those broken chairs and get some new chairs. Once you start to walk into a room with different eyes, you notice some of that stuff. It's sort of like I can't go anywhere anymore without looking for ligature risks. You start to change your brain a little bit. So we'll be rolling out more of those perception walkthroughs, and then I welcome the feedback that you guys have after you do those on how we can improve our units. So once we, really start to turn that corner, which I think we already are, and I think our restraint and exclusion data shows us that, here's the outcome for patients. It's less punitive and less judgmental. If there's a few things that I would like us to continue to work on and maybe catch each other on a little bit in the nicest way we can, is the victim blaming. And I think we all, I do that. It's easy to kind of get into victim blaming. The thing I hear the most recently is it's all behavioral. They're being manipulative is one of the things that I used to always hear, and I loved it. The honest truth is I'm manipulative too. I'm actually very manipulative, and I'm really good at it because usually I can get what I want at the end of it. We all are. We know how to work the system a little bit to make it work in our advantage. Unfortunately, the people we work with are manipulative because they're used to living a life of chaos, And when we put them in a world that's not chaotic, it's structured, they're gonna work really hard to get back to that chaos because that's what they're comfortable. They're comfortable living that kind of chaos. It is what it is, it doesn't feel good, but by labeling it something negative, doesn't achieve any goal, right? So what's our purpose in calling it manipulative? It's not solving anything, it's not helpful. So some of you have heard me talk. I went to visit a school in Pennsylvania a couple of years ago. It's an outpatient, it's a school, K through 12 school that takes kids primarily who are being discharged from like a PMIC sort of facility. They have about 100 students there. It's kind of like the kids who go to Polk, so it's your really most challenging behavior kids. And one of the things the principal says, what the principal says is, I don't allow any of my staff to say anything negative about any patient or family. It's not allowed. It's not allowed in staff meetings, it's not allowed in staffings, it's not allowed in the break room. It's not allowed. He also, and I can't remember if I addressed this someplace else, I repeat myself, sorry. When they're in a group or in a classroom, he encourages them to say only positive or neutral statements. So everything is phrased in a way that's either positive or neutral, like what I want you to do rather than what I want you to stop doing. And they work with Lehigh University there, so they have a lot of student teachers. And he said within a couple of weeks it becomes so natural for people that he goes, one of the ways to track that is he actually goes into the classroom and they will do a tally of positive statements, negative statements, neutral statements. And within a couple of weeks, you can't tell who the teacher is and who the student teacher is. Everything is phrased in this is what I want you to do, not you need to stop doing these things. So again, clearer expectations, higher expectations. So one of the things we know is if we set those expectations, people live up to them. People will rise to the expectations that we set for them. And less violence, less restraint and seclusion. And that's really one of the goals. That's safer for us, and it's safer for the patients, and it's less traumatizing for everybody. And then outcomes for staff as we really move towards that therapeutic milieu. I hope you're already proud to be part of the community you're a part of and part of this team, because I'm proud to be part of the team with you. But you can really feel good at the end of the day when you know that you've de-escalated a situation, or you've offered options like the sensory room or whatever that is to avoid a restraint or seclusion. I can tell you, I get a little report every morning, and I just am so happy every time I click on that report and there's no restraint or seclusion. And so far this year, it's like almost every day. So it's awesome. It's a safe environment. Again, we have higher expectations for our patients and for each other. We start to really expect that we're going to perform high. Staff are more satisfied, less absenteeism, less turnover. Those are all things that as a system we're working towards, and we know that by improving the therapeutic environment, it'll help for that. Oh, let's see. So these are just some of the attributes of the staff. More empathy. These are things we've kind of talked about. That piece of really identifying your own feelings. There's times we know that people push your buttons for a reason. Sometimes it's because of our own history and our own background, and whatever that situation is, it may feel close to us. Several years ago, this is quite a few years ago, we did, in one of the division meetings, we did the ACE quiz with everybody as a division. And we found out that our community is no different than any other community. We've got people with a high ACE score. About a third of us in our division had 2 or more ACE scores, which is consistent with every place else. One of the things that's important to work in this field, though, is we need to be comfortable with some of those strong emotions. You need to be comfortable with people who sometimes will act up, will say things that maybe we don't like to say. I can't remember if I've said this in a division meeting before, but sometimes when I teach CPI, I tell people, so I grew up in a family of not yelling. My parents didn't yell. My parents, we weren't spanked. I knew when my dad was mad, mostly because he shut down. He was one of those people. My husband, on the other hand, grew up in a family of yellers. He grew up in an Irish Catholic family of 8 kids, 7 boys, 1 girl, and the stories that if I were like as a professional working with his family, I'd probably call DHS. Now, this is of course, the 70s when maybe it was okay to do some of that stuff in that Irish Catholic community. So when we got married, I wasn't used to, I wasn't comfortable with those angry feelings that was just normal for him, and it wasn't a big deal. So we need to get comfortable with people being angry as well, and I found out I'm actually pretty good at that. I'm kind of good at de-escalating people. I'm good at people being angry, and I can typically calm them down. I think part of it may be that I'm not a very intimidating person, so they know that I'm not going to come after them. But you have to be comfortable with strange behavior sometimes too, right? We work with people who have sometimes can be a little, don't act the way we would expect them to. We also have to be comfortable working in an interdisciplinary team, and I think that that's the piece that, one of the things that I hope we really enhance a little bit is how do we count on each other on our team. So, if Brittany meets with a family on 3s, is what she's doing incorporated into the treatment plan. I think that, I'm not going to read through all of this stuff. One of the biggest things, and that's why I have it bold on there, is really we need to have a spirit of hope for the patients that we work with. It can be really challenging when you have somebody who, those people who are preferred customers who kind of continue to come back time after time. It's hard to have hope for them. I hope that, I believe that we're in the field of always having hope, and that even if they can't get maybe where we would like them to get or where we would say is successful, if we can move them along the continuum of change, that's probably really good for them. I think I've gone over most of this stuff. That staff assignment thing is really important to be thinking about, when you're setting those assignments, the people who, maybe you have one really challenging person. Do you rotate who has that person? I think we do a pretty good job of that. Kind of back to those norms and rules. The last couple slides are about rules, and really the rules should emphasize nonviolence and really lots of communication. Everyone is heard. Program activities. Some of this is redundant, so I'm trying not to do too much. So rules, this is one of the things I remember talking about when we went over the engagement model stuff years ago. Think about that. Some of the nonverbal things we do that show your power. So we have keys, they don't have keys. So be careful about that stuff. Controlling things, those rules that I think we've worked really hard on, whether it's when you can have a snack or when you can take a shower, or when you can make a phone call. Are we focusing on, limiting some of those sorts of things, or at least using critical thinking around them? Oftentimes it's the way we say things too. So, I think about, and again, most of my examples are with kids, but you say something to a kid, well, how would your mom feel about that? Kind of that shaming, humiliation thing. Be careful about those sorts of statements. Rules should be minimal. Not that we shouldn't have rules, and I hope that we've all gotten to that point where I'm not in any way suggesting we don't need to have rules. In fact, structure is very important. It's really important that we have that structure, but I think we just have to be careful sometimes, know where you want to fall on your sword on. And they should be reassessed at times, and I think sometimes it's okay if the team decides we're going to kind of go outside of the norm on this one. It's probably okay as long as the team agrees. Here's some ideas for 3 simple rules. Don't hurt yourself or others. Take care of yourself. And use everything for your upliftment, learning, and growth. Those may not be exactly the words you would use on some of those, with some of our patients, but really be thinking about everything you do it towards really learning and growth and improving and instilling that hope. think about that, the noise. One of the things and you notice that when you do the perception walkthrough, you'll notice some of those things in terms of the noise on the units. Sometimes some of our patients are noisy. How do we address that? We can't control that necessarily. When my dad was in the hospital, the patient across the room either didn't have a hearing aid or needed a hearing aid, and we could hear the TV next door as loud as it was in that room. So it was, those things within our environment that maybe we can change. Some things we can't change though, so how do we address that with them? Transitional items, I don't know how, sometimes those are tricky. I don't know how we address those. So items that, are really important to someone, do we allow them to keep some of those things as long as it's not a safety risk to help them feel safe and comfortable in a new environment? Sometimes I think that, maybe we can. How do we do that? How do we address those things? CPI is specifically listed in there. I think that, there's things that we can do within our environment to make them more pleasing and therapeutic. The CPI strategies that we all get are so important, and my biggest thing that I tell people all the time, my takeaway from that is how I decide my behavior is going to impact your behavior impacts my behavior. So today I got a phone call from an extremely angry mother of a former patient on 2 East who's convinced that we, for whatever reason, don't like her son, we don't want to help her son, we don't want to admit her son, and he's probably going to die, and then she's going to sue us because he's using drugs. She was very, very angry. And I could get pretty defensive with her, which is sometimes your natural reaction when somebody's really angry, but I knew if I got defensive and responded back defensively, it was only going to escalate her. So by keeping calm and trying to do some problem solving with her, I was able to de-escalate her and work on some problem solving. These are all things that we already do. So this is my last slide. When Sandra Bloom, who's somebody we brought in for a speaker to our conference a few years ago, she's done tons and tons of work on trauma-informed care and engagement model. When we're optimistic and we're positive, it's going to improve the mood of the entire group, the entire unit, really. If you're working with positive coworkers, that improves the mood of the whole team. As opposed to when we're negative, there's negativity and frustration, it also decreases the performance of everybody. So that's kind of my takeaway for you is this, not that I expect you every single day to come in and be like, rosy and sunshiny, because that's hard. But if we think about how our mood and how our affect impacts not just our patients, but really our coworkers too, it can change the whole milieu of our unit. So it's kind of my final takeaway. That's all we got. Somebody have any questions for me about this or anything else that's going on in the hospital or? That's all I've got. Thank you for your time. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you were able to de-escalate the parent. How did you do so? What sort of techniques did you use?
Well, I said I was sorry.
Okay.
That was one of the first things I did. I've talked to her before. She's called me periodically over the last year. So she continued to say, sorry's not good enough, sorry's not good enough. And I tried to move into then, problem solving. What can I do for you right now? I understand you were on the ED yesterday and we didn't admit him. I can read through his notes and I can tell you stuff, but one of the things I told her is I'm not going to make excuses for what we didn't do, but I'd like to help you right now. And so we were able to, I asked her what she wanted. She wanted an appointment. They had scheduled an appointment and she missed it. They missed it. So I got her another appointment for tomorrow. So, kind of tried to do problem solving and forward thinking with her. She totally lowered her voice and de-escalated when I didn't respond to her. And by, I think apologizing and problem solving. She still wasn't completely happy. She said, oh, don't worry, you'll be hearing from me again. I said, that's okay, you can call me anytime. And I made sure she had my direct number. you know, when I was a frontline staff, one of the things I would often do is, you know, can I bring in my supervisor? Can I bring in my manager? But saying you're sorry, even if it's not, like, I didn't do anything, I wasn't even there, but I'm sorry that happened to you, is usually how I will phrase it, that, you know, this is really hard, it's really hard to have a son who's a meth user, I understand that, and you're worried he's gonna die. And the reality is he could, so. Thank you all for coming, thanks for your time.
Thank you.